The story begins during a harsh winter in the Colorado mountains, where there is an ancient belief in an evil being that inhabits the forest. According to the legends, it appears in times of hunger to punish those who dare to feed on their own kind. When this entity appears in dreams, it means it's too late, and the victim is already doomed to live as an insatiable monster. In the middle of the forest, we see the outlines of a car under the snow and a red trail that ends in a puddle. A few days earlier, David Peterson is ready to hit the road despite the forecast of snowstorms and extremely low temperatures. Continuing his trip, he decides to make a stop when he sees a diner sign. Inside, a waitress named Anna is finishing serving Gene, a city worker who is with his son. Checking her phone, she sees that there are 13 missed calls and one rude message. Her face fills with fear when she sees that it's her ex-husband Vince who is trying to call her. David arrives just as Gene is saying goodbye to Anna and asking for a meal, but she warns him that the cook has left because of the storm. So David settles for a piece of pie, and when she stretches her arm to serve it, he sees a bruise that she quickly tries to hide. But soon her fears become real as she sees Vince's car arriving. He barges into the diner, yelling curses and complaining about the ignored calls. The fight is about their daughter, whom Anna is trying hard to keep away from her alcoholic father. When he grabs her arm and starts shaking her, a firm voice says it's better to stop right there. Noticing the only customer, Vince becomes enraged at the audacity of the stranger and approaches David's table. After knocking over the coffee with a slap, Vince spits on the piece of pie and tells David to eat it, brandishing a knife threateningly. Calmly, David explains that he heard the argument and suggests that Vince go home and sleep right now, as he will never see his daughter again if he hurts someone today. The advice works, and Vince leaves the diner muttering vague threats. Before leaving completely, he kicks David's car's side mirror. Anna apologizes for the situation and offers to prepare the meal that David wanted, as a thank you. A few minutes later, David fixes the side mirror with some tape and continues his trip. The next stop is a gas station, where he decides to pop into the convenience store, unaware that Vince is still nearby, downing one beer after another. David's purchase goes a little over $50, which he has in hand, so he gives up a cookie. When the attendant informs him it can be charged to his card, he jokingly replies that his wife has access and doesn't need to know everything he does. At the same time, Vince recognizes his car parked at the station and steps on the brakes, but then he sees a police car arriving to fill up right at that moment. One of the officers goes to talk to David, ordering him to fix that poorly attached mirror right away before he gets fined. With no opportunity to attack him right there, Vince waits until he leaves and then starts following him. David only notices the unwanted company when the other is practically ramming the truck into him. However, his sobriety gives him enough advantage to quickly create distance. As soon as Vince loses sight of him, he makes a sharp turn and turns off his headlights, hoping his enemy won't see him. The plan works, and he sees Vince's truck pass straight by, but now David is so anxious to get away that he ends up sliding on the icy road and getting his car stuck in the snow. He begins to panic as he sees that he is unable to get out of there, not just because of Vince. Outside, the snowstorm is in full swing, and he has a hard time facing the wind to reach the front tire. His hands almost freeze as he starts to clear the snow from the wheels, and his state returning to the car is pitiful. It takes a long time for him to warm up at all, and on top of that, his phone has no signal. With little choice, he does what he can to conserve the car battery as the storm improves. It is then that he begins to hear a heavy sound that seems very close, like footsteps or knocks. He can hardly see anything through the window, but he prefers not to risk going outside so soon, even doing his necessities in a plastic bottle. When the wind finally lets up, he gains the courage to open the car door, which is already covered in snow. With a pair of binoculars, he spots some smoke coming from a point not too far away. Satisfied with this, he heads to the trunk, and it is only then that we discover the truth. After that encounter with the waitress, David took advantage of the situation to kidnap her. Ignoring her obvious despair coldly, he tells her not to move and slams the door again. The malicious joke costs him dear, for Anna realizes that he is going to step away for a few moments and begins to fight for her freedom. She soon manages to free her wrists from the tape and starts banging on the trunk, shouting for help. David is already far away when her hand finally breaks through the panel, dismantling part of the back seat. Pushing a baby seat forward, she raises her body just in time to see David returning. In panic, she rushes to open the door wide and runs away as fast as she can. Fortunately, David is very weakened and takes a while to approach, not yet having noticed that he lost his hostage. However, Anna herself can't take running at that pace in the middle of the snowstorm. Collapsing to her knees on the ground, she looks back with a pure look of hatred and decides to change strategy. At the same time, David accidentally steps wrong and gets his leg stuck in a hole, which leaves him badly injured. He lies stretched out in the snow, screaming in pain as Anna returns to the car and closes the door again, trembling from the cold until she recovers. Then she starts to rummage through the vehicle and finds the tape that David used to bind her and a bottle of chloroform. Outside, the universe seems to have begun punishing him for his actions. Leaving a long red trail behind him, he crawls through the snow with tremendous effort until he reaches the car. There is no sign of Anna when he opens the door and sits in the driver's seat, breathing heavily. Once again, he starts the car to warm up his hands, unaware that his victim is curled up right behind the seat. Taking a knife from inside his coat, he takes a deep breath and starts tearing part of his pants. The wound is so ugly that he lets out a groan of disgust and looks away for a moment before biting the handle of the knife and roughly adjusting the bone. Still hidden in the same spot, Anna sees when he leaves the knife on the passenger seat and knows she has to act fast. However, it is now that he notices the open glove compartment and suspects that something is wrong, adjusting the mirror to confirm his suspicions. He can't see her, but he hears the quiet noise that her coat is making as she takes out the chloroform from her pocket. Realizing the threat, he begins to stretch his hand toward the knife, but Anna ends up being quicker. She attacks him from behind the seat, covering his face with a cloth soaked in the liquid. In panic, David starts to struggle, and she has to hold him with all her strength until he loses consciousness. Sometime later, he finds himself with his face in the snow in front of a huge, slain deer. But as soon as he looks at the blood on his hands, the nightmare ends. When he truly wakes up, he realizes he is tied to the seat by the neck and to the steering wheel by his wrists. Anna used all her kidnapping equipment to take him hostage, and now she also presses the knife against his neck, demanding answers. David claims he cannot tell her where they are, as he ended up getting lost in the storm. He also says that before tossing her phone away, he used her finger to unlock it. This allowed him to send a message to her mother lying about a visit to Vince, which probably dissipated any concern about her delay. Furious about this, she becomes even more distressed when she sees that his cell phone is not working. Now that the practical questions are over, she moves on to a more personal interrogation, asking if he has kidnapped other women before. David swears he hasn't, but the lie does not hold for long. As soon as she begins to question the bottle of chloroform, he corrects her and says that it is another substance. According to him, chloroform acts very slowly, and the victims take the opportunity to kick and punch while they can. Besides, there's no way to control how fast they inhale the substance, and it can kill them before he can have his fun with them. Anna becomes increasingly disgusted as she listens to him and gets irritated by his calmness, as if he were still in control. He explains that she is not as free as she thinks, as getting out of the car now could be fatal, and also that it is not she who is in control, since the knife only works for those who have the courage to use it. However, this composure is slightly shaken when Anna demonstrates her knowledge of extreme cold and narrates her plan in detail. She intends to wait until the worst of the storm passes, and then will open the car doors wide before leaving. The only doubt will be whether the wild animals will finish him off while he is still breathing. Only then does David realize he doesn't know how long he has been unconscious and the car has been running this whole time. Appealing to the fact that they are in the same boat, he convinces Anna to conserve the battery, as there is no way to know if they will be there for hours or days. Then she starts trying to investigate her kidnapper, but doesn't find much information in his wallet. Showing that he himself was more cunning, he mentions her daughter by name, Ella. This provokes an outburst of fury in which Anna throws the baby seat outside, having concluded that there is no baby at all. That is just another way to deceive women, making David seem less of a predator. Still trying to irritate her, he warns that it won't be easy to stay awake in this cold after going through all of this. Without attempting to refute the theory, she prefers to ensure that he will also be out cold, and uses a cloth again to knock him out. The same terrifying nightmare invades his mind again, but this time with even more details. Besides being with dirty hands, now there is a stream of blood flowing from his mouth as well. A chilling whisper begins to disturb him, and he looks back, seeing an impossibly tall figure walking through the shadows among the trees. Again, he wakes up startled, which makes Anna think about what a maniac's nightmares could be like. Thinking about what kind of person he is and still not knowing exactly what awaited him if it weren't for the accident, she rejects his offer to share the bottle as a potty right there inside. After ordering him to stay very still, she exits the car and tries to be as quick as possible, knowing the risk she is running. David does not waste any time and begins to squirm, looking for some way to use his hands. When Anna returns, he is still stuck, but he managed to lock the doors to keep her from entering. In disbelief, she goes to fetch the baby seat that is still lying around and begins to hit it against the window with all her might. David is shocked by this turn of events, especially as the tactic works. After shattering the glass, she sneaks back inside and pulls the driver's seatbelt to the limit, almost suffocating David completely. While he recovers from the attack, she starts to cover the damage she just did, to prevent snow from getting into the car through the broken window. David appears to have fallen asleep when she begins looking at the photos on her phone and is horrified by what she sees. He has been keeping an eye on her for a long time, taking dozens of photos and recording videos of her day-to-day life. What disturbs her the most is seeing her daughter Ella in several of the images, in which the two unaware of the lurking danger. Still taking advantage of her captor's apparent nap, Anna continues searching for more clues and ends up finding the trophy box, where David keeps the records of previous victims, all young women. When David wakes up, she asks how long he has been stalking her and why it had to be her. Always cold and malicious, he complains about having to hear that same question every time and explains that he didn't see anything special in her, just the opportunity. Being an immigrant and a single mother, he knew her disappearance wouldn't be investigated thoroughly. The only detail that went off course was Vince's intervention, which almost spoiled everything. When Anna asks the total number of victims, he tries to feign indifference and lies that he never bothered to count, but she retorts that that collection of documents is the best proof that he cares about this sort of metric. He dodges, trying to shock her, and says that one of them was pregnant, asking if he should count it as two. More and more outraged, Anna begins reading all the names aloud, while throwing each document at him. The name Cassie Beckerman is the first he recognizes right away, and he explains that she was the first. At that time, he was still testing his limits and learning about female psychology. The encounter itself was a stroke of luck, as Cassie needed a ride and was the one who waved him down on the road. The false clues were already spread around the car, the ring clearly visible on her finger, and he even completed the charade pretending that he didn't want to help her too much. He saw her glancing at all this, calculating the risk mentally before making the wrong decision. Concluding that David was harmless, she got into the car calmly, not seeing the knife stuck by his leg. The two conversed normally for a while, and she didn't suspect a thing until the moment he went straight past the turn he should have taken. He made some excuse about traffic, and she pretended to believe it, but the mood changed perceptibly. Cassie then began her own tricks to deceive him, inventing all kinds of excuses to get out before. Soon the situation became unsustainable, and she began to scream, begging him to let her out and threatening to call the police. At the first opportunity, David grabbed her by the neck and pulled out the knife, brutally silencing her screams. Despite the mess and the imperfect execution, he was very proud of his first crime. After that, he had to hide for several months, as Cassie was the daughter of a judge, and he didn't know. This made him think better when choosing targets, trying to limit himself to women of little significance. Anna is disgusted by the tale and asks what leads someone to become this kind of monster. David begins to laugh when she rattles off a list of classic motives, but his attitude completely changes as soon as she mentions problems with his mother. It's obvious that this is the root of his psychopathy, and he strives to change the subject. Proving that he can also play psychologist, he starts talking about Anna's marriage to Vince, betting that he wasn't the first brute in her life. Tired of hearing him mock her suffering, she closes his mouth with a piece of tape. Sometime later, she ends up falling asleep and suddenly wakes up startled. That heavy sound of knocks is again surrounding the car, and she cannot identify what it is. David also goes on high alert, then gets a huge scare when the thing jumps on top of the car. Anna also panics, and now the attacker is banging on the windshield with a hand strangely resembling a human hand. Seeing that the glass is already cracking, Anna obeys David's desperate grunts and starts the car, honking the horn frantically. This seems to scare away whatever was on top of the car, at least for now. David then begins to complain about the pain in his leg, and Anna says that the skin is already turning dark. With no reason to feel any compassion, she says that if the storm continues like this, losing his leg will be the least of his problems. While analyzing the map of the area, she calculates that they must be in the middle of a forest reserve and begins telling the legend of the evil spirit. David struggles to appear skeptical, but is shaken by the detail about dreams, as she says that this is the first sign that a person is about to be possessed by the entity. It also does not help that the light suddenly goes out in the middle of the story, as the car battery has finally died. Hours later, the cold is so intense that Anna curls up in David's lap to absorb his body heat, keeping the knife raised in case he tries anything. He says that if they sleep again, there is no chance they will wake up. Anna prefers to stay optimistic, saying that the snowstorm will pass before that happens. Sensing the worst, David begins talking about his difficult childhood and claims he would like to be a different person, but he knows he cannot expect compassion. Also opening up, Anna shares that she grew up in an orphanage and was adopted by a father who committed constant abuses for a long time. She only had the courage to report him at 15 years old, and her life then spiraled into a whirlwind of vices and crimes. However, all of that ended when she became a mother and decided to give her daughter everything she lacked. She concludes her story by saying that David has no way to justify his atrocities, and no matter what he says now, nothing will bring back the lives he has taken. This doesn't seem to hit him much, and he begins talking about how the cold makes everything weaker, including the tape that has kept him bound until now. In a quick motion, he frees his right arm, snatching the knife for himself, and lunges at her afterward. Whispering right in her ear, he promises special refinements and swears that after he is done, he will go after her daughter too. Anna reacts to this with fury, and the two exchange blows until they hear that thing again, which finally breaks the windshield. David can hardly believe it when he sees the deer's horns appearing in the middle of the snowstorm. His own malice begins to blur with the possession of the evil spirit, and he grabs Anna even harder. She can only free herself by taking off the jacket, and then delivers a precise kick that sends the villain flying outside. Ironically, the only possible refuge is the same trunk from which she fought so hard to escape. Looking at a photo of her daughter, she promises that she will not fall asleep, but it is increasingly difficult to keep her eyes open. It is night again when John passes by and finds the bizarre scene strange. Anna's jacket is lying in the snow, along with what appears to be a pile of entrails, and strange sounds are coming from the woods. He checks the car to see if he can find something, and luckily when he looks inside the trunk, he finds Anna. She appears to be dead with her body almost frozen, but nevertheless, and thankfully, Anna opens her eyes.